Members of Congress targeted in a shooting, plus more criminal charges in the Flint water crisis, and one of the most polluted zip codes in the state, and what people who live there are trying to do about it. It's a One Detroit in-depth look. Stay put. MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015. It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Maryland cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. So glad that you've joined us. We have a lot to get to, but first, shock around the country with a shooting that targeted Republican lawmakers outside of the nation's capital. A congressman wounded and 3 members of our Michigan congressional delegation on that baseball field where the shots were fired. We are going to start there tonight, and joining me now is our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. When this news started to break on Wednesday morning, it was just one of those things that you just had to stop and say, where are we living right now and what is happening? Stephen, I'm going to start with you because you spoke to Mike Bishop, Congressman Mike Bishop, who was on the field yesterday. And what were your impressions of when he was speaking to you and what his thoughts were?
It was actually WDET's Pat Batchelor who was on the phone with him. We played it on the show that I host on that station, though. You know, the fear, the absolute terror, really, was so evident in his voice. I mean, Mike Bishop's someone we've known for a long time in public life in this state, and he's not someone I would ascribe intense emotions to in any real context. Yesterday, it was really evident that this shook him, and he said to me, or said to Pat, this changes everything. And I don't know what he meant by that. I don't know if he was, I mean, I'm certain he was in shock, but I think it was that kind of moment for him where it's a reset, where you're sort of reevaluating everything, at least in that moment.
In that moment, that's what he was feeling. What do you think about that phrase, this changes everything, Nolan? And you wrote a column today talking about, you know, blame no one in this situation but the shooter.
And so that's why it changes nothing. I mean, this guy was obviously not a rational person. He's obviously deranged, obviously has mental problems, just like the young man who shot Gabby Giffords 6-7 years ago. Nothing changes about that. I mean, you have people who are going to act on their passions, on their impulses, on whatever it is, crazy thing that drives them. But the truth is, some people are just crazy, and we could change everything we do, you know, in terms of our tone and our rhetoric and what have you. It's not going to change the fact that you got some people out there who flat out behave in irrational, violent matters.
But they behave in violent, irrational ways, but is that fed by the tone and the rhetoric and the conversations that we're having? Representative Jack Bergman from Michigan was also on the field, and, you know, he tweeted out today, he said, you know, we're talking about motive, but he said, quote, "This is a good time to reflect on division and unity." What do you make of that, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I think, look, this has been a violent nation from the very beginning. It's born of rebellion. It endures a bloody war that claims 500,000 lives to get rid of the scourge of slavery. I mean, everything about this country is sort of bathed in this idea that violence is an acceptable means to a certain end. Think of the violent oppression of people in this country that's happened since its inception. That is the context in which we're talking about these things, and so I think it's very difficult to imagine how you change those things. People are in this is one of the most violent nations in the Western world. 60,000 people a year get shot, 11,000 murdered by guns every year. I mean, this is who we are. I don't submit to the idea that there's nothing we can do. I think there are ways to even if you're not going to change the violent impulses that people have, the means that they have to carry out those violent impulses can be restrained, but the violence itself is just it's a merit.
Without going down the road of gun control, that's not a conversation that I want to have today. You're talking about you don't want anyone to make this political. You want to say take the politics out.
I think it's fine. You look what I wrote today. You go back in 2011 when Gabby Giffords was shot. Oh my God, it's Sarah Palin's fault. You had the New York Daily News. The blood of Gabby Giffords is on Sarah Palin's hands. It was Rush Limbaugh's fault. It was the hostile rhetoric of the Tea Party. Now, 6-7 years later, you've got Republicans shot, and you've had months of this sort of outrage and hostile language from Democrats, and we're saying, oh gosh, now we got to change the rhetoric and what have you. Look, this guy was known to be a troubled person. What sort of help did he get? I mean, what are we doing for the mentally ill people in our society? And I'd say not much. And I don't think he was driven by, some Hollywood producer staging a silly play or what he was hearing from Democratic politicians or talk shows hosts. I think his own demons drove him. And, we should start thinking about, he had been in this, there'd been warning flags with this guy. Why had nobody heeded them? I mean, why was there no intervention for this person?
Are we going to be seeing just some more different safety conditions for Congress and congressmen and women?
Well, I mean, I think that would be the really cynical response of lawmakers, right? To react to this in a way that protects themselves from this kind of thing, but doesn't do anything to protect the 60,000 people a year who suffer gunshot wounds, often in circumstances exactly like this. Not 2 months ago, a black lieutenant in Northern Virginia was killed by a right-wing extremist who just picked him out of nowhere, came up and shot him to death. Why shouldn't that person have more security if Congress does? I mean, these things happen a lot in this country, and they happen mostly to just normal people. I don't think the fact that it's happened to a congressman should inspire us to protect Congress more. It ought to inspire us to think better about how to keep everyone safe.
And I doubt they want to live under that sort of environment anyway. Their jobs depend on that close interaction with the people. I don't think they want a security detail in between them and their constituents. This happens. It happens infrequently, fortunately, and I think to overreact. I think to overreact now would, after the deed's done, would be a mistake.
All right, another big thing that happened this week, turning now to new charges in the Flint water crisis. The head of the Department of Health and Human Services, Nick Lyon, has been charged with involuntary manslaughter and misconduct in office. The chief medical director, Dr. Eden Wells, is facing obstruction of justice charges, and these are just the latest criminal charges. The additional charge of involuntary manslaughter now has been added to 4 others already charged, including former emergency manager Darnell Early. And this is related to the outbreak of Legionnaire's disease and what the Attorney General says was gross negligence in failing to alert the public about Legionnaire's until a year later. And still, they're looking for the actual solid connection between the Flint water crisis and the contaminated water and Legionnaire's. You had 12 people who died from Legionnaire's, 100 people who they believe are sickened by it. So there's a couple of different elements to this story. First, I want to talk about the fact that you have people so high up now in state government who have been charged. Nolan, what do you make of these charges?
Well, I think the charges are curious and they may be specious until you can tell someone, until you can establish 100% connection between the water and the Legionnaire's and eliminate other probable causes like the hospital. I mean, it just as easily could have been the hospital. I don't see how you charge anyone with manslaughter or anything else for not alerting the public to the threat. If you didn't know the threat came from the water. This looks to me like a real stretch on Schuette's part. I think he's way out there in a dangerous area. And
dangerous how? You believe that he is doing this ... Why?
I don't know. I think it doesn't. I think you'd hate to say, well, he's ruining people's lives for his political purposes, but these are really shaky charges.
And we've never seen, again, people of this level in government being charged in this way.
Not with this guy. I mean, this is a 15-year felony if you're convicted of it. I mean, that's a very serious charge. I think it would be very hard to prove in front of a jury for some of the reasons that Nolan was talking about. It is hard to establish the connections here. I suspect that this is about putting pressure on those people to give the Attorney General more information, to close some of the loops, maybe with regard to people a little higher up. I mean, these are not, you can look at these charges and say there's no way he's going to drag people through this number of trials for involuntary manslaughter on this case. I mean, that's crazy. He's trying to get plea deals, and in those plea deals, he may extract other information from those people that maybe up to this point they have not been particularly cooperative.
But we've been saying that from the beginning with these charges, and I don't think we've seen any evidence yet.
No, that's right.
Of that happening. So, you know, you wonder if the whole point is just
no one has been charged with this kind of thing yet. I mean, this is
not with involuntary manslaughter, and it's from one death. But one thing that also, or two things that also stand out to me, is the fact that Governor Snyder came out yesterday and said he has full faith in Dr. Wells and also in Nick Lyon, that they are still remaining on the job. Number one, but then number two, the fact that Attorney General Bill Schuette kind of dangled this weird open door of we haven't been able to speak to the governor yet, and we'll see. It's kind of a very strange,
reckless, irresponsible on Schuette's part. Sure when he was asked that question, he should have said, "We're not going to talk about any pending investigations until our investigation goes further." To leave that door open, to intentionally create the impression that Rick Snyder is a target of this and may face charges in the future. I think it was irresponsible as a law enforcement officer for him to do that. I don't blame Snyder for being angry.
Well, yeah, I think.
Do you think it was irresponsible and reckless?
I don't think it was irresponsible and reckless. I think he's trying to get. Why didn't the governor talk?
Governor says he wasn't asked to talk.
Waiting for a subpoena.
I think this is about pressuring those people who have been charged to help open that door into the governor's office. I think that we're awfully close to it at this point. It's, you know, this is a cabinet level appointee who, and if you read the information that's in the charging document, I mean, really, really outrageous behavior. The only question is whether you can connect it to this Legionnaires outbreak. But the idea that Nick Lyon should keep his job and Eden Wells should keep her job, that's really outrageous. Think about the number of times we've seen cabinet officers charged here in the city of Detroit, for instance. Can you imagine if Kwame Kilpatrick had kept people around when they were charged with crimes, or if Coleman Young had the kind of screaming that we would have heard?
I think the governor doesn't think much of the charges, and as he pointed out, you've had people suspended for over a year now and not had their day in court. And I think obviously there's a political row between the governor and Bill Schuette.
Yeah, but I think also, though, when you say that people haven't been in court yet in a year, I think we also still have to step back and say there are people that still can't drink water out of their tap without a filter in the city of Flint, and that's been going on for a long time. All right, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up and leave it there. You know, finally tonight, a closer look at one of the most polluted zip codes in the state of Michigan. It's 48217, and it's in southwest Detroit. And while it's home to heavy industry, it is also home to residents who have been educating themselves and fighting for years to have a cleaner environment. Tonight, our One Detroit Closer Look examines the steps that are being taken.
The CDC sent Dr. Laura Berman in to do a 3-year study. Their samples showed no harmful chemical above the standard, but ours showed that we were off the chain.
The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality holds a hearing concerning Detroit's wastewater treatment plant in southwest Detroit. The plant's sludge processing equipment put too many pollutants into the air, so the public gets to comment on the violations.
I really feel disheartened about the process.
Teresa Landrum has lived in southwest Detroit all her life.
There's no notification to the residents when there is an exceedance of a dangerous emission.
Here's Rhonda Anderson, who's with the Sierra Club.
We've been to literally, I'm going to suspect hundreds of these permit hearings, especially in this area.
And that's Dolores Leonard, the leader of the group.
How is that going to impact the workers, some who are here tonight? I thank you.
3 environmental activists working together for nearly 2 decades, trying to convince the government to do more to protect their community.
You know, in the 50s and 30s and 40s, that's when African Americans started to really move into the area.
When you look at it, it's all economics. And we, as I keep telling people, we are collateral damage. We're in the way.
Who has the ear of MDEQ? Do you think they're listening to a bunch of poor black people as we've been identified, or Latinos, or people of color, or, you know? No.
This most southwestern part of southwest Detroit, inhabited mostly by African Americans, an area known as 48217, the most polluted zip code in Michigan.
This little diagram here, it shows all the industries within a 3-mile radius that's located around my zip code. This little black outline, that's 48217. Industry, 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 heavy polluters.
At the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources and Environment, Professor Paul Mohai and some others have been studying 48217.
These are the 8 most polluted zip codes in the Detroit metropolitan area. And except for this one out here, they're all congregated around 48217. And not only is it among the 8 most polluted zip codes in the Detroit metropolitan area, but it's the most polluted based on the data that we used from the toxic release inventory.
This is what we call the black side. When I was growing up, all of this was segregated. So this was the only area that black folks could live in.
Rhonda's taking University of Michigan professors and students on one of her toxic tours of the neighborhood.
So the fish seem to be doing good, but I would eat the fish.
They're looking at all sorts of heavy industry: steel mills, oil refineries, the wastewater treatment facility, and the coal-fired power plant by the river.
The emissions that go into the air eventually fall somewhere, and weather patterns generally go from west to east. It makes sense that the air pollution is getting into the Great Lakes and to more local water supplies.
I've been doing these tours for probably 15 years. And really, they are so damn depressing. You know, it's like, when do we win? When do the people win? You know, all you can do is talk about the bad stuff.
Along with the industry comes the exhaust from trucks passing through. A lot of them headed up I-75 and over the bridge to Canada.
All of those trucks, they back up on the freeway, you know, diesel emissions, and they have an impact on the people's health as well.
The trucks create sulfur dioxide, bad for your lungs, and soot from diesel exhaust is not good either.
Some of the stuff is so fine it can't be seen. We're breathing it every day. So therefore it's locking itself in our lungs and all over our body.
Marathon's oil refinery has been here since 1930. It's grown a lot since then, making gasoline and other things like asphalt, propane, and sulfur.
I taught myself how to read a permit. When Marathon in 2007 applied for that expansion, and other companies since then, I have taught myself to sit down and read.
Part of the problem for Marathon, they just look ugly. You know, they're massive, they're big, they sit there in front of everyone, you know, and so that's what people concentrate on. No one is kind of looking over here at nasty DTE, that coal power plant in River Ridge that was actually putting out more poison than even Marathon.
Someone asked, have you tested the soil? And so the results came back contaminated with, you name it,
arsenic and lead, heavy arsenic and lead. We have a toxic soup down here. The cumulative impact, that study that we have been asking for, because Marathon emit a certain amount of different chemicals, DTE emit certain types of different chemicals, US Steel emit certain types of different chemicals, AK Steel emit certain types of chemicals. What is the byproduct of all these chemicals mixing into the air? If one is toxic, then they find out 2 is toxic. When you combine 2 toxic things, isn't that a toxic monster?
The problem is, even with all the factories holding their emissions under allowable limits, Add all those emissions together, just how toxic is 48217 now? The activists are still trying to find out.
My question is my child's health less important than your job? You know, where I believe we have the technology, we have the science, we have everything we need right now to have both a good paying job and a clean environment.
The group concedes that in the past it did not play well with industry or government agencies. Now they're trying to build relationships to get things done. Last fall, the MDEQ installed an air monitoring station behind the new Mount Hermon Baptist Church with help from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
This air monitoring station being put in 48217, that is monumental, because I really feel that we're one of the first communities to ever have this done.
I think it's important for us to know what we're breathing. I used to work for BASF and in the automotive coatings division, so I'm aware of toxins and what they can do to your body.
I'm testing for SO2, which is directly related to man-made industry, acids found in the air. We're also testing for metals and particulate, specifically 2.25 micron, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds that are found in the air as well.
The monitoring is planned for only a year. After that, who knows? The EPA is on our new president's chopping block.
We're certainly hoping that our funding will remain the same so that we can continue to do the air monitoring work here in Detroit and throughout the state of Michigan.
75 miles up I-75, Flint found itself in the national spotlight with its water crisis, something that might bring more recognition to the problems in southwest Detroit.
Some of the same toxins that were discovered in the water in Flint are actually in the air in this community. And so it took what happened in Flint to bring notoriety to the battles that we've been fighting in 48217 zip code.
Teresa Landrum's mother and father died of cancer. Her sister was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 24. Her aunt lives a few streets away. She has cancer too.
I'm a cancer survivor. I got cancer. I've never smoked, used drugs, or drank. I'm in this fight to save somebody else's life if I can. I do it because I love my community. This is all I know. This is all I have. If we as a people, we as a government, we as human beings can work on that problem, I'm sure we can solve some of it and give our children, which are our future, a chance at a better life, a healthier life, a livable life.
Some final notes for you. Marathon tells us its refinery constitutes 3% of the criteria air pollutant emissions within a 2-mile radius of the plant. In the last 15 years, they've reduced emissions by 70%, even as they've increased the capacity. They're going to continue to find ways to lower them further. As for DTE, they will retire coal-fired energy plants in 3 cities in Michigan, including River Rouge, by 2025. For more on our report, just go to MiWeek.org. And that's going to do it for us. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time for My Week. Take care.